It was supposed to be just another late-night interview, casual, warm, the kind of segment that would quietly fill airtime and be forgotten by morning. The studio lights dimmed to their usual amber glow, casting familiar shadows across the set. Everything was routine, until Keanu Reeves walked in. Something shifted the moment he stepped under the lights. It was subtle, like the faint pressure change before a storm. His footsteps echoed a little too clearly against the polished floor. The audience clapped. Of course. How could they not? But even their applause felt uncertain, as though some unspoken presence had entered the room with him. He moved with his trademark grace, soft, unhurried, almost like he was floating rather than walking. But there was something else. His smile, so familiar, usually tinged with quiet warmth, seemed dulled tonight. It didn't quite reach his eyes. His shoulders were slightly hunched, not in nervousness, but in weariness. As though he were carrying something invisible, something heavy. The host, ever the embodiment of late-night charm, stood to greet him with an easy hug and a quick-witted joke. "Keanu, you still look like a samurai monk, or maybe a brooding guitarist from the 90s. The audience laughed on cue. Keanu responded with a faint smile and a polite nod. He sat down, adjusted his jacket with slow, deliberate hands, then lowered his gaze to the table between them. There it was, a glass of water, a leather-bound notepad, and something that didn't belong. A crucifix, but not a new, polished one. This was old, damaged. The wood was split down the center as if from pressure or time. The figure of Christ hung at an unnatural angle, tilted sideways, not with reverence, but in anguish. It was the kind of object that demanded attention, but the host didn't seem to register its presence. He took a casual sip from a ceramic mug etched with his name, already preparing his next question. Then something cracked. Not a sound, but a feeling. Keanu's fingers, resting on the arm of the chair, twitched almost imperceptibly. His mouth opened slightly, closed again. His breathing changed. And then he said it. "Robert Prevost." Just 2 words. But they fell into the space between them like a stone dropped into deep water. The name of the new pope. But there was something in the way Keanu said it, quiet, reverent, haunted, that pulled the entire room into stillness. No one spoke. Even the cameras seemed to hesitate, their tiny red lights flickering like dying embers. The studio, so often a place of noise and light, had gone silent. Not a respectful silence, a stunned, involuntary one. What followed wasn't an interview. It was something else entirely, a confession maybe, or a memory trying to claw its way into the present. Keanu didn't raise his voice. He didn't weep. But there was a tremble in his hands, in the way he gripped the edge of his chair like someone trying to anchor himself. He spoke of shadows that linger in daylight, of voices heard in empty rooms, of faith, not the kind worn like a badge, but the kind wrestled with in darkness. Each word felt like it had cost him something, and when he finally fell silent, the room didn't breathe. The silence that followed Keanu's words was not empty, it was thick, living. It clung to the walls, wrapped itself around the cameras, and settled over the audience like dust in a church long abandoned. The host, normally quick with a follow-up, sat frozen. His hand hovered near his coffee mug, but he didn't lift it. For once, he seemed unsure whether they were still filming or if something more sacred was unfolding in front of him. Keanu's eyes remained on the broken crucifix. "I knew him," he said quietly. There was no context, no build-up, just the raw sentence dropped like ash from his lips. "Not the Pope?" he added, almost absently. "Before." The host blinked, confused. "Before, Robert Prevost was—" But he trailed off. Something in Keanu's tone made it clear this wasn't a story meant to be interrupted. Keanu shifted slightly in his chair. His fingers now rested on the notepad. He wasn't reading from it, just touching it, the way one might touch an old photograph or a scar. 1987, Montreal. I was filming then, just starting out. I met a man at a cathedral. He wasn't dressed like a priest, didn't talk like one either. But he knew things. About me. About things I hadn't even lived yet. He paused. His voice remained calm, but every word was precise, as if chosen with great care. He told me that names carry weight. Not just history, but memory. That some names echo louder than others. Prevost was one of them. The audience was no longer breathing. They were holding on to his every word with white-knuckled stillness. A few rows back, someone began quietly crying. No one turned to look. He said someday I'd see that name again, Keanu continued. When it happened, I'd have to choose. Between forgetting and remembering. The host finally found his voice. Choose what? Remember what? Keanu looked up then, truly looked up, for the first time since he'd walked onto the set. His eyes locked onto the host's with a weight that defied explanation. It was like being seen by someone who had already read the last page of your story. Have you ever stood at the edge of something? Keanu asked, and felt like the ground behind you wasn't really there anymore? The host said nothing. He couldn't. Keanu leaned forward slightly. His hand, still trembling, reached out and gently touched the cracked crucifix. I saw it in a dream. This exact one, broken, leaning. It was in his hands when he died. The studio lights flickered. The cameras didn't glitch, but for a split second, every monitor in the control room went black. A faint sound followed, static, low and muffled, like a voice trying to speak through snow. The crew began shifting uncomfortably. A production assistant whispered something into a headset and stared at the soundboard like it had grown teeth. Keanu sat back, exhaled. I didn't mean to bring this here, he said, but some things follow you, even when you forget how. The host cleared his throat, his voice suddenly dry. So, you're saying Robert Prevost, the Pope, was someone from your past? Keanu nodded once. He wasn't a pope then. He was something else, a guardian, or maybe a warning. The audience was dead silent. The laughter signs had been turned off. No one noticed, or perhaps no one dared laugh. Keanu's eyes dropped back to the crucifix. They found him in a monastery. No blood, no wounds, just that crucifix, broken. And carved into the table was a single word. Remind. Outside the studio, thunder cracked. But the forecast had promised clear skies. The thunder had no source. There were no clouds, no rain. The sky above the city was still a canvas of midnight blue and distant stars. But the crack had been real. The sound vibrated through the studio floor like a bell struck deep underground. Keanu didn't flinch. The host did. A small twitch of his right eye. He tried to play it off with a forced chuckle, but it fell flat in the silence. The mug in his hand trembled slightly, the ceramic clink of it tapping against the desk suddenly louder than it should have been. So, this word, the host said, pushing forward as though sheer professionalism could cut through the strange fog. Remind. What do you think it meant? Keanu's eyes didn't move. He was staring now. Not at the crucifix anymore, but past it, as if seeing something the rest of them couldn't. I think it wasn't meant for me, he said. I think it was meant for all of us. A low hum rose in the studio, an ambient frequency that hadn't been there before. Not mechanical, not electrical. It was more like a vibration behind the eardrum, felt more than heard. The audience began shifting, looking at each other. Whispers started to bloom. Keanu? The host's voice had softened, and there was something real behind it now. Not entertainment. Not ratings. Concern. Are you okay? You seem like you're somewhere else. Keanu blinked slowly, and for a moment something passed over his face. Grief, recognition, maybe fear. It lasted only a second. I never stopped being there, he said. Not really. Then he looked at the crowd. His voice, low and steady, cut through the room. There's a reason we forget certain things, and there's a reason some of us can't. The ones who can't forget, we're meant to hold something, even when it hurts. Silence again. And then, the crucifix moved. Not by much, just a shift. But it scraped against the table, the sound sharp and raw, like wood against bone. The host froze. The camera crew exchanged glances. One of the lights above flickered hard and went out, dropping half the set into uneven shadow. Keanu didn't move. That's not a prop, he said. I didn't bring it here. But it found me again. It always does, when the name is spoken. A voice from the control booth crackled over the intercom. We need to cut to commercial. But the screen behind the host suddenly glitched. What had been the show's animated logo now flickered with a single static image. A monastery hallway, faded, flickering, old stone bathed in candlelight, and carved across the frame, in trembling handwriting, Remind. Someone screamed. The studio lights all cut out at once, total blackness. Then, a single spotlight snapped on, directly over Keanu. His eyes were closed, lips parted slightly, as if in prayer or memory. No one moved. Even the cameras were still running, though no one could say who was controlling them. Then he whispered, barely audible. Robert Prevost wasn't just a man. He was a door, and now that door is open. And as if responding to the word open, something answered. From somewhere deep below the studio floor, beyond the sets, the walls, the city, came a sound. A low, slow groan. Not mechanical, not earthly. Like something massive waking from beneath centuries of silence. The crucifix cracked again. The Christ figure fell.